Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
And it just only exists to annoy me. Like, do you think like he was like, oh man, I know me and Haley are gonna have a baby one day and it's gonna take me off the channel, and there's this British twink that I've got my eye on. When he comes of age for Geeky Gentleman Scholarship, I'm gonna bring him on the channel for a year or two, weed him in. And then I'm gone. And now he can't give up because then he looks like an asshole. So it's just like
That's exactly what it was. That's the exact thought process.
Oh God. On that note, hello everyone. I am a geek for fun,
And I'm that Matt kid.
and today on Geeky Gentleman, we are doing a film review of a semi-infamous, I don't know be the word, controversial, might bear. This film's got a rep, right? I'm not in the Alien fandom, but it definitely, from how Carly described it and like just looking up online for research for this video, this has got a bit of reputation behind it.
It does, for sure. I wouldn't consider myself like a hardcore like Alien fan, like super into the universe. But yeah, my wife Carly, she really loves Alien, especially like the first Alien is like one of her favorite movies of all time. Um, and so this is a franchise that's a big deal to her for sure. And she's always told me that like Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection are just the most fucking garbage movies. Um, and I'd never really like I'd seen Alien and Aliens. I'd never seen this one though, so I rewatched 2 and 3 to get ready for Resurrection. And honestly, I'm really glad we're doing this one instead of Alien 3 because I feel like I just have more to say about this one than I do about Alien 3 because Alien 3 I just find kind of dull. Whereas this one I find certainly not dull, but very, very bad. So
Yeah, it's definitely not dull. At least at certain points. I do think I have this problem with, I've only seen, for context for people who don't know, I've only seen the first Alien, and not even till the end, and this one. And both issues I had with these films is that the beginning pacing is ass. And I know I'm going to get crucified for saying that about the first one. But it's just like, I understand that you want to build up the tension and the stakes and like, the threat of the monster. But like, for most of the like half an hour until you get to see the aliens in this film, I remember because I looked at the timestamp. And it's not like the aliens around for that half an hour and then that's the final big reveal. It's like, that's how long it takes for one of them to be fucking born. For like over half an hour, we're just kind of dicking around. And to be fair, there's stuff going on in here that is interesting. There's a lot of concepts in this, which I really like as just like sci-fi exploration. And from what I do know of the Alien franchise, just colloquially, and what Ian's done on the Geeks for Fun channel with his Alien videos, I picked up more and more of what the deal is. And I think a lot of that stuff that's in this
sure.
has like potential as like just conceptual wise. And I imagine there would have been gorgeous, terrifying, horrific concept art for this film as it was being made. But aside from
actually.
yeah. But aside from that, it is kind of one of those things where there's like a mixture of like the Star Wars sci-fi, but it's grunge, where like it's kind of like beat up old sci-fi. Like it's clearly future tech, but it's like realistic future tech where it's just kind of nothing works properly. And that's kind of the aesthetic of this film. And I think the set design and everything of this is gorgeous. I really love, especially when we get to the animatronics and stuff, just to get positives out of the way. All of that, I think, is just top-notch stuff. But actually, narrative-wise, I struggled to get into this. If you asked me to name anyone but Ripley, I would be able to fail, fall on flat on my face. There, I can't remember any of the characters' names. I can remember certain scenes, and I can remember certain characters that like Ron Perlman's character
Yeah,
stands
Ron
out.
Perlman and Winona Ryder.
Yeah, I know the actors, and that's always an issue. If I know the actor's
Yep.
name more than the character, that's an issue. Um,
Well, you know, it's funny because like the set design and just the aesthetics of the universe. The thing is with this movie is that I don't think that on its own any of that stuff is bad here. But my ultimate thing with this movie is that this does not feel like Alien, like at all. Like a lot of the stuff is there in theory, right? Like you've got this government that's wanting to try to harness this power they can't control. You've got all this stuff. Like that's very classic Alien, and it's all there kind of in theory on paper, but none of it plays the way it does in the first couple Alien movies, and it just doesn't feel like the same universe to me. It doesn't feel as grounded. It doesn't feel like the aesthetic of the first two films to me, and even the third film, as much as I don't love the third film. Now, part of that is because story-wise, they jump ahead a couple centuries. This movie takes place like 200 years after Alien 3. So there's, kind of some story leeway to that. But I think another part of it is that this is written by Joss Whedon, and boy, can you tell. I mean, you've got this like discount Firefly crew as sort of your main group of heroes. Um, Ripley is essentially a parody of herself, which again, there's kind of a story reason for that. She's a clone that has some spliced alien DNA going on, so her acting a little differently is not necessarily wrong by the standards of the story. But I've never watched a movie like this where I've sat there watching it and just thought to myself, this doesn't even feel like the same universe anymore. Like Alien 3 I didn't like, but I can at least be like, okay, yeah, this follows Alien 2 or Alien and Aliens, and this at least feels like a natural progression of the universe. Whereas this, it very much felt like we're going to try to revitalize this for modern audiences, and this look out, Alien is being resurrected. This is the new and improved Alien series, and it just killed the personality. It killed the aesthetic, and it killed the atmosphere of what made the original couple Alien movies so beloved. So I think a lot of the ideas are here in paper, but the execution is horrendous.
I wouldn't. I guess it depends on what aspects of that you're looking. Because I would disagree that I think some parts of this are executed wise. It's just the concept doesn't have any legs.
Sure.
Like I think the actual direction of this, it might not be in the same vein as the previous Alien films, but like just as a film standalone, and I guess this is me just as less of a fan of the franchise. I like a lot of the direction choices in this. I like that we kind of go crazy with some of the camera angles, and there's a lot of wide lenses.
Well, it's not necessarily that. It's more just the aesthetic of the the actual set design and things like that. Alien and Aliens have this very particular, we took the late 70s, early 80s vision of the future and projected it, onto the screen. And then this, we've just kind of moved away from that, which is fine. This movie was made in the 90s, like the late 90s or mid to late 90s, but it just makes it feel more generic as a science fiction universe. I'm not saying the camera work is necessarily bad or awful, but when it comes to the set design and the overall aesthetic of the universe presented within the film, I think it creates a more generic look and feel than what we've had, especially in the first two films. And generally, with Joss Whedon's scripting here, a lot of the characters are way more exaggerated than the types of characters we had in the first two films. The first two films, part of what makes them work is how grounded they are, is how just real and three-dimensional all these characters feel. And then you get to this movie, and it feels like this more exaggerated take that it almost feels like a parody of itself. And that's one of the things that just really took me out of it. I didn't feel like I was watching a film in the same universe as the original films, which, I mean, maybe that's just my hang up, but I couldn't get that out of my head watching this movie.
I think that's definitely fair, and I wonder if how much of that do you think? Because the moment you set any sequel 200 years in the future, you're immediately making a statement that you are going. That line only exists because they could have done 50. They could have done 30. Like, you can buy cloning technology in the world of the first Alien. They've got spaceships. The moment you make that leap, you can buy anything, right? It's like, that's why Star Wars got away with it. Just a throwaway line. Oh, yeah, it's the Clone Wars. It's just like, clones, yeah, whatever. Every sci-fi series has clones. So, like, the reason they probably went 200 might have been just, well, we want to do something different because Alien 3 did kind of aim to go for the similar kind of vibe, and people didn't like that one either. So I can understand creatively wanting to, in your fourth entry, because, like, even if I haven't seen this film, but I feel like everyone on the street knows that the big difference between the first Alien and the second is that one's a horror movie and one's an action film. That even then, that's a big genre shift, and I don't think this shifts genres per se. I think it just heightens those things to another degree. So, although yes, probably this, if you're going to a franchise, you probably do want to get what that franchise has been selling you. But at the same time, I'm always kind of in the side of the creators where I'm like, well, you know what? Fuck it, you've seen that film, right? Like, you've seen, you can't top it. So if you're gonna imitate it, you might as well just do your own thing, and that can come with bad sides and negatives, as like it didn't work for you. But like for me, I can at least respect that looking at a franchise and not knowing where you want to take it, at least taking it somewhere new, even if it is ridiculous. Like, this is a ridiculous movie, but that's kind of what is endearing. Like, any film that has a scene where Ron Perlman fucking shoots a spider, I'm immediately just kind of like, okay, okay. Someone had to, they had to film that scene. Like this is a ridiculous film, but like at the same time, like, okay, that's memorable at least. I say that, but that energy isn't carried throughout this entire film. If this whole film was what almost what you were describing, like this was just a parody of Aliens to the umpteenth degree, I imagine it probably wouldn't have been any better, but it probably been looked up more fondly as just kind of like, what is this? This kind of gets there in some places, but doesn't fully. It still wants to treat itself kind of seriously. So it's hard to know where to stand with it. Like, part of me just wants to be like, yeah, I actually kind of really dug this crazy, bizarre mess of a thing. But at the same time, no, this is pretty practically constructed, and a lot of the scenes, like when she sees where Ripley sees the multiple clone bodies, like, oh fuck, this film is trying to make you feel something, and then we're right back to the crazy, and it's just like, I tried to look up because this feels like a film that should have just like on paper, and just being the fourth entry in a main franchise and all of this, oh, this must have had massive production issues. No, swimmingly. And that was a shock to me, because this feels like very totally inconsistent, and I must have had multiple rewrites and stuff. It's like, no, everyone was on board for this one. I had a very smooth production. I was like, okay, because I don't know if that came across to you, but the things I like in this movie don't gel with the things I don't like.
Yeah, I know Joss and the director Jean-Pierre Jeunet. I know they had a few like minor scripting and plotting disagreements, but nothing major, nothing that you wouldn't expect on any film of this size, of a franchise this big. Um yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I hear what you're saying. And even though Alien 3 more captures the aesthetic of the original two films, I still find this one way more entertaining. Like, I wanted to take a nap halfway through Alien 3, whereas Alien Resurrection, it doesn't capture what I think makes the Alien universe interesting aesthetically. But it's at least entertaining to watch. Because my problem is not you can't do something different. My problem is you did something different that just made it feel more generic. Like if you had done something different that still managed to be interesting visually, then fine. But I feel like the direction they took with this just made it feel like more of a generic sci-fi thing, purely in just the visual design of the in-film universe itself. Um, I don't want to spend too much time on that because one, I feel like I've already said my piece about it, and two, there's a lot more to dig in here in terms of how they handle, um, cloning Ripley, her discovering her cloned bodies, the way that the alien mother gives live birth to a creature that then views Ripley as like a mother. Like that's kind of interesting. And there's like a lot of stuff here that I think is kind of entertaining and worth digging into for sure.
And like, I think that's got something to it as well because aliens as a whole, like Ian's done a very good job of explaining this to me and like informing this just through conversations we've had. Like Aliens as a franchise is all about sex and rape
Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
the human body and everything about that. So literally, like just conceptually wise, like forgetting about how the execution of the film is, just if you said this on paper, so we start an alien film where Ripley is taken away from her will and quite literally having a child ripped from her womb, and then her feels like her body has been used against her will and contorted in unnatural and horrible states, and then having to confront this child like as its home is a very fucking like, oh snap, we're going there, we're dealing
Yes.
with how that affects womanhood and that affects the human body, and how does that feel for this characters. We've gone past the rape allegory now, so now we're talking about what happens when you're raped by the state, when you're not allowed to choose what your body is able to do. And I don't like, I wouldn't fucking put it past Joss Whedon for thinking he can tackle that eloquently. So part of me feels like that is entirely intentional, and just again,
Yeah.
just from the imagery and the Alien franchise, it's all there. And as a film, I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea for this franchise. That's a great way to go. That's powerful for a
Yeah.
female protagonist to have to confront that and then burn it all down and come out of it stronger. So that I'm here for. I'm in. I'm invested. And a lot of those scenes where it is just focused on Ripley, kind of dealing with, I think are actually, I would say. I will say well acted because Sigourney Weaver's an amazing actress, and I feel like you could give her anything because she'd do good with it. And I think it's just interesting how she kind of does give the mannerisms of the alien in her performance. Like it comes off
Yeah.
kind of goofy, but
Yeah.
the intention is there. Like if it was a comic book or something, it probably would have worked a little better. So that all of that I'm here for. And before we dig into how that ends up looking on the screen, how do you feel about all of that?
Oh, I love it. That's my thing with like Alien 3. I don't think Alien 3 picks up thematically with what the Alien franchise is doing as well as this one does, weirdly enough, even though this is the one that kind of feels very separate from the rest of them. I think having the whole just boiling it even down even further to essentially what would happen if the host survived and the xenomorph, like how would the xenomorph view the host, things like that. Like that's not only an interesting place to take it from an in-lore storytelling point of view, but tackling motherhood, tackling Sigourney's character, Ripley finally being in the position where her body's being manipulated by the people who have been trying to do that for the last 3 movies. Like that is the natural place to take this. So I'm not mad at any of that for sure. And I think it's um, probably the best place to take this franchise in terms of what you're going to do thematically with keeping what's already there in terms of the rape and sexual, imagery and things like that. So no, I don't mind that at all. I think that's a really good place to take it. It's weird though, because like it's not really Wayland Yutani anymore. Like it's not like a corporation because the other things that the other two Alien movies have going for them, in addition to being, um, all about, wouldn't it be scary to get raped, because that's kind of what they are. But they also have this very anti-capitalist stint going for them, which is, sort of like Jurassic Park. It's something that people don't always. I'm surprised how many people don't see it there. But it's a corporation. Weyland Yutani is a company that wants the aliens so they can sell, basically this killing machine. Whereas this, we're 200 years in the future. Weyland Yutani isn't really a thing anymore, and it's just this like not terribly well defined like United Federation government thing. So it's a little bit different than what it was. But I mean, yeah, that's all that. I still think works. I just wish that had maybe been brought a little bit more to the forefront. But I do think a lot of that works, or at least works on paper.
And what I think you kind of touched on there, with your other point of this feeling more generic, is moving it to just the military makes it feel more generic.
For sure.
When you don't have that specific antagonist from the previous, and like again, 200 years in the future, there's no reason to just not keep that. Corporations, like, scare. That's even scarier. It's like, oh my god, now they've got even more of a foothold because they've just been around for so long. That would be the way to go, right? Is they are the military. They are everything now. It's kind of like some 1984 type stuff, but in space. So it's kind of weird how they kind of ditch that in favor of just jackboot style military, when everything else just kind of naturally leads to, wow, they wouldn't even let me die, like, right, like that's the invasion of like, if you want to continue from the third one, because it's obviously where that leads off, is she's not only everything about her free will has been taken to her, not just the rape allegories. Now she doesn't even have access of her own life because these things will bring her back and clone her just so they can dissect her some more. Like, that's some really crazy interesting stuff. But rather than dealing with that, we kind of just take these really weird detours where we've got so the basic plot I kind of like, of, wow, we want to experiment with the aliens. Well, we're gonna need human bodies, so we've got these mercenary guys who go around basically kidnapping people for us to experiment on. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I can buy that. That's a good bit of lore. And how do these guys feel about that? But then you get to the military guys, like, none of them really have anything going on, like, character-wise. Like, it's just, wow, we need bodies for the aliens to kill, right? And that's why we've got this large group that gets whittled down as we go. And, like, that's okay for, like, a horror movie, I guess, and a slasher movie. But once you've got, like, this core here, it's arguably would be a stronger film if you just cut that out entirely and literally just had Ripley, the aliens, and the scientists, and it's just a much more personal film.
Yeah, because I mean, in the original, like, Alien and Aliens, the alien, the xenomorph, they're not. How do I phrase this? They're not necessarily the bad guy. They're animals. They just do things. They just are there. They know to reproduce, hunt, reproduce. That's all they know. The villains are the Weyland Yutani, the corporations, the people who are putting other people's lives in danger purposefully for their own selfish gain and getting them into the situation where they now have to deal with these killing machines. Whereas, and in those movies, you always have someone who's kind of the face of that. In the first two movies, you always had someone who you got to know, who was kind of there to represent sort of the capitalist interest in this creature. And here you have the, like, general dude whose name I don't know, and that's about it. And then and you have Dr. Wren, who's just kind of a fucking crazy person. But even he's not really representing anything. He's just sort of a scientist who wants to study them and stuff. And he gets taken out, and it's very quickly just, how do we deal with these aliens that are all over the place? And so we almost kind of forgot that the aliens aren't necessarily the villains per se. They just are. and it's just about how different people want to use them or what have you. Um, so I mean, yeah, I do think by not having a character more in the focus who's kind of representative of that side of the conflict, we kind of lose that.
And that's something that definitely feels to me, um, especially given everything else that had been thought about. That's something that was just entirely, oh well, who cares, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to deal with this. We're not interested in this bit. These guys are just here for bodies being the thing, because that's just what happens in these films, right? It's looking at it from a place of not love, but just how can we, after the third film, how can we get back to just what were the beats of the first and the second one? Like, I think one of the mandates actually that was in the script was it has to feel like Alien with the action of Aliens, as like a mandate, right? And like,
Yeah.
sure, that's kind of thing, but that's ignoring what probably made those two films work on their own.
Well,
You're trying to match what someone else did rather than actually create within that world and flesh it out.
it's almost that meme of like someone looking at something and being like, "Oh wow, cool alien," and then missing all the stuff that's going over their head that was like supposed to kind of be the point of it. But I don't want to accuse this movie of that entirely because Joss Whedon at least gets the other types of allegories and metaphors going on here. Besides the capitalist stuff, you have the sexual imagery and the sexual assault stuff like that. And I mean, that's here at least. So I mean, it's not like it's missing the forest for the trees entirely, or it's not like it's missing the point of those films entirely, but we're missing a good chunk of kind of the critiques that were going on in those films for sure.
We've got all the ingredients. It's just we're choosing to only work with a certain bit of them, right?
Yeah.
We're going straight for the meal, and we haven't had a starter or dessert.
Yep.
Which I think is just like a good analogy for what this feels like. But at the same time, it's not like I want to go to this just because this is the thing that stands out to me the most, and I'm very curious, just as you being more of a fan and more knowledgeable. You let me know immediately how you feel about this, but I really, really like the idea and design of the human alien hybrid and like the puppetry on display there.
Yeah, it's cool. I don't hate that. I mean, the Alien franchise is weird because they're like every movie we have to add a new xenomorph or like change the xenomorph. So like Alien is just Alien, classic xenomorph. And then Aliens, of course, we have the classic xenomorphs plus the Alien Queen. Alien 3, it's just back to one xenomorph, but it was attached to a dog, so it's like a quadrupedal dog xenomorph. And then this one, they're like, okay, it's not just like she's dead, so we have to clone her. But because the alien was already inside of her, the DNA sample that we're using already has alien DNA in it. So when we clone her, she's not fully human. She's actually part xenomorph as opposed to just being human with a xenomorph inside her. So like when that hatches, of course it's going to be something a little bit different. Now, I'm confused as to how exactly we get to the human xenomorph hybrid because the xenomorph they pull out of her is just a queen and it lays eggs like normal. Like it still lays eggs, the eggs generate face huggers, the face huggers impregnate people and xenomorphs come out. So I don't know what causes it to suddenly at that point in the film give live birth to like a new, like I don't know why that's happening right now and why that didn't happen like from the beginning.
Like, does she
um
have a human womb
was
along
it like
with?
growing? Yeah, was it like grow? Yeah, that's the idea that the human alien hybrid because in Alien 3 when they do the scan of when Ripley does the scan of her to realize she's got an alien in her, she knows that it's a queen. She's like, I have an alien in me and it's a queen, and the queen is what lays the eggs that the face huggers come out of. So they pull the queen out of her, the queen grows up, and so I have to assume that the queen is capable of putting out eggs that hatch face huggers and is also capable of giving live birth because it does both of those things. and I guess it just takes time for the live birth one to like grow up inside the womb in the alien mother. So I guess that's why it doesn't hatch right away. But then it's not even the alien queen that was inside Ripley that views Ripley as its mother. It's the the live birth. It's basically Ripley's granddaughter. It's Ripley's grandchild. And I mean that's like fine, whatever. You have to approach a sci-fi universe, and you have to kind of look at the rules of how the universe works and figure out how to tell your story in a way that's believable within the rules of the universe that exists. You don't want to just make random shit up, or at least you don't want it to feel like you're doing that. Otherwise, you just kind of feel like, what's the point? So I mean, I get that, that works. Like, it's fine that like the queen has like the ability to give live birth. It gives live birth to something that's a little bit more human, and then the more human thing has kind of the skull shape of a human at the end of its head. It's got like actual eyes that you can see, which is something that I think Joss and Jean fought about, because I think Joss originally wanted it to not have eyes, and Jean was like, no, it's gonna have eyes so it can emote, which was probably a good idea. So no, I like it. They actually managed to make it kind of cute, I guess, when it's being cute. I think the design of it's cool. It was originally going to have both female and male reproductive organs very visible.
It was like a huge giant ball sack that they had to edit out.
Yeah,
which
and
is
they're
really
like,
funny to
and
me.
they're like, yeah, that's maybe that's a little too. But I mean, yeah, it looked good. I thought the design was interesting. I thought the puppeteering was fine. Or not fine. The puppeteering was very good. So no, I mean, I liked that quite a bit. I think that's like the most interesting thing in the film, and it happens like when the movie's like 10 minutes from being over.
Yeah, it's one of the things that should have been almost your main monster.
Exactly. That should have been the thing. That should have been the whole point of it, because then you could have actually had Ripley dealing with the fact that this thing is purposefully ignoring her and like killing everyone else, and like having to deal with the fact that this thing looks up to her as a maternal figure. Like, you could have actually made a whole movie out of that, I think. And so it's weird to take what should be your main thematic idea and just toss it in at the end as like your end of game monster.
Which is, I wonder how much of that is just practical. I wonder how much of that is, well, that's what we wanted to do, but we also feared how people aren't going to respond well if we don't have a regular alien in this film.
Yeah, sure.
Because people are gonna freak out. It's a soul thing, and we've got this weird hybrid thing. And I know some people just from looking up just don't like the design of it either. So I definitely think
it's fine.
I so do I. I think that would have caused some eye if it was just that. But you're 100% right. That would have been the different direction that you can get away with more, because then you are saying, well, we're not even using the design. We're completely just taking this idea to the next evolution, quite literally, and we're not falling back on what we need to. But it still does. It still does fall back. You still have the scene with the queen. You still have the scene with the xenomorphs kind of planning in their cell, and that's something that I thought was weird as well. Is like the xenomorphs seem like really kind of intelligent in this. Is that a thing in previous things? Because again, I've seen Ian subscribe to me as well, and like just you have kind of confirmed that when you're saying, oh no, they're not even the villains, they're just like animals. Here they are, the villains.
Yeah. They like, I don't mean to say that they're not intelligent. I mean, they are intelligent in the way that any like apex predator species is intelligent,
like a tiger or something.
Yeah. I actually really thought it was cool the way there's a scene, because I'm sure there are some people maybe watching this who haven't seen it and don't care. But there's a scene where they have all the xenomorphs locked in pods, because like they had a queen, they had the mercenary crew bring them the face huggers so they could impregnate people, or bring them live humans so they could impregnate them and get xenomorphs. They put all the xenomorphs in like these individual pods so that way they can just be watched and studied. And they also can like train them. Like, there's a great scene where a xenomorph is like in its little pod, and it like growls at the dude and tries to break through the like glass or whatever, and the guy, the scientist, like hits a button that causes like a, I guess like a fire suppressant to like kind of a coolant to flood into the room, and the xenomorph's like ah, and then the xenomorph tries to like move towards him again, and he just like hovers his hand over the button, and the xenomorph's like, oh no, 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 I'm not that stupid. I'm not gonna get hit by that again. And he's like, oh okay, well you guys are pretty quick learners. So like they are smart in the way that like any apex predator is going to be smart, but they're not like evil or malicious. They're just good at what they do. They're the best at what they do, and what they do is not very nice. But there's a scene where they have 3 xenomorphs in one pod for some stupid ass reason, and xenomorphs have acidic blood. So 2 of the xenomorphs are just like, well, if we just kill Frank here, Frank will die and bleed out all over the pod, and then the acid from Frank the Xenomorph's blood will make a hole for us to escape, and that's how they get out. I really liked that scene. I was like, that's cool. Like that's just that kind of like predatory ingenuity that I was like, oh, that's neat. But again, I mean, like I said, they're not necessarily malicious creatures. They just wanted to escape.
Which is fair, because that guy outside the thing was trying to make out with him. Like, I think that's the unquestionable reason where the human hybrid came from, because he's the guy who got brought to the Queen first, and he's very happy once it comes out. So I'm just saying, man.
Oh yeah.
He fucked the Queen. That's what went down in that delete. And it's a Joss Whedon film, man. Someone has to land on someone's boobs, and like, so he got brought down into the pit. All I'm saying. Enjoy that image, folks.
That's what I was thinking when they were doing like the basketball scene with Ron Perlman and Ripley. I was just like, yeah, this is a Joss Whedon script.
You know what's dope about that though, which I actually found out, is like, you know when she like does the behind the back thing, like that's not edited.
Really?
She just nailed the shot, and they have to cut away from. They have to cut away from it super quick because everyone in the cast was like, "Yo!"
I mean, I will say that everyone looks like they're having a hell of a good time, which is always fun.
Everyone's enjoying this film. No one's going slog through this. I think that's also like, I mean, Lona Ryder's probably the only one who's kind of just like completely deadpan throughout all of this.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much fun she's having, but definitely everyone else is completely like, it's that like 90s ham. Like everyone's kind of like going a bit crazy on set. Like someone's getting licked. Everyone's kind of getting really close to each other's faces. Crazy ass smiles and looks at the camera. It's full of this.
It feels very 90s in a way that, at least to me, Alien and Aliens feel a little bit more timeless, I guess, as part of it. I mean, that could just be me being close to what I like and saying, this is bad, this is new, I don't like it. But I don't know. This at least feels more like a product of its time than the originals do to me.
I think for sure. I think a lot of the CGI elements in this do. I think a lot of the... Like, I was praising the camera work, but I still think the camera work was good, but the camera work is definitely more dated camera work. It like the open mouth scream, camera down the throat, the throws the grenade and we track the grenade, and like that's all 90s action movies of this time. Everyone was doing that. So I definitely 100%, and like a lot of the brown hues of like the color palette of this film, 100%. This is without a doubt a 90s film. I kind of enjoyed it for that, because I like that time period just for schlock sometimes at least. But it definitely is without a doubt lacking any kind of form of timelessness or even just in how characters are written and the archetypes we have here. Like, you have the guys who's making the sex jokes. We have the kind of tough, gruff, I didn't sign up for this, like guy, like everyone's kind of copied since Predator. Like all the main archetypes for that kind of stuff are in here. I mean, and the basketball scene, which is every 90s film needs to have a basketball scene. So like it's all there, man, for sure. I don't think you are any biases there. aside, I think you're 100% right. This is probably the Alien film that most definitely feels like it's time until you get to the new ones, which do feel, just from like trailers and stuff, like those films in the movies. We've yet to recapture timelessness, and that's not against it really, because how do you even go about trying to make something
Yeah, I mean
timeless?
that's yeah, you can't. I mean, truly. I mean, for sure. I'm not gonna. I'm not trying to hold the film to the standard of why are you not as good as two fucking genre defining masterclass films. Like I'm not trying to be like that, but I mean certainly it does. I think all of that goes into why on just kind of a visceral level it feels so almost out of place. Um I don't know. There's a lot of I mean there's a lot that's interesting here that's not necessarily like deep. It's just kind of odd. Like it's interesting how like we were talking about how like Ripley, because this is a clone of Ripley, she's really not the same character, and she's a clone of Ripley that has alien DNA just in her from the get-go. So she has enhanced physicality. She has her own blood is acidic now, which I was just like, okay. And she has the ability to sort of feel things and can almost sort of sense things in the same way the aliens can do. Like she can tell that the ship is moving when like no one else can tell it's moving. So she's essentially been given like superpowers almost. It's kind of interesting, and her seeing all the clones of her and the one like partially alive clone that's just like kill me, like that all is really interesting, and that's one of the only scenes in this that really like hit me in any particular way because I was just like, oh damn. And all of that stuff is just kind of a that's my problem with it, is that like it's all interesting, I just don't know how much I have to say on it because it's not like they do a ton with it. It's just kind of there.
And that's kind of the trend with this film, is everything's just kind of there.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was just kind of a thing of, because this was meant to have sequels. How this ends with Earth was meant to directly lead into the start of a new franchise. Where it was like Resurrection wasn't just to cap it off; it was to start something new. I definitely think the potential, at least conceptually, is because we've done all prequels since this. It's definitely not too far to continue. Like as long as you've got the aliens in it, you can kind of do whatever you want with this franchise. As long as you have some kind of semblance of grounding, like you mentioned earlier. I wonder how much of this was them bedging on that. Like it's like, okay, we don't want to push things too far because we want this to be the next start. We want to bring people in for this. We want to get the casual audience and the younger audience who's never seen an alien film like caught up, and then we're gonna get the old fans. Here's a new monster, and we bring everything, and then we've got all of you back, and then we're gonna keep going from this on. So we're not gonna push anything too far. We're not gonna frighten you away, and then that kind of backfiring and causing people to drop it entirely because they come away from this like, oh well, you're out of ideas.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be shocked if the Alien franchise ever touches this timeline again. Because if we ever get a sequel to Alien, I can almost promise you it's going to be a sequel to Aliens. It will probably ignore Alien 3, and it will be set not 200 years in the future. So I would be shocked if we ever got a sequel to this like timeline, if you want to call it that, to this like 200 years in the future thing. I'd be shocked if any creator, be it in a comic or a novel or a video game or a future film, I'd be shocked if anyone touches this. Because I think that's exactly right. I think it's that textbook of, we want to reinvent this franchise, but we're too chicken shit to commit to really reinventing it. And I'm sure that wasn't necessarily their call. I mean, I agree with you. I'm sure a lot of it is, creatives wanting to push it farther and probably studios pulling them back. Because I mean, you're absolutely right. If they had gotten to push it farther, we maybe didn't even have like a traditional xenomorph. We just had the hybrid. And we just kind of said, this is what we're doing now. This is the story. And we just really made a good, compelling story out of that. Then I think I would have walked away from this way more positively. But it's the introduction of elements, that aren't explored, so that way we can dedicate more time to trying to recreate the classics, even though we're not really doing that. That really just hampers any of the good ideas that are here.
And that's a shame, because with any creative or any fandom or any franchise, really, you want to be able to, you want to throw ideas away. You don't want to just, as bad as something is perceived or as bad as something is, like, you don't want to just, all right, that's it, that's killed it, we can't ever touch this again. Like, there's always gonna be an idea from this, right? There's always lessons to be learned, and I feel like this is a sad example of where this kind of burnt a lot of bridges so far that we've had to go so away from what this is, because this, to get away from anything that resembles this, and even anything that remembers the first two, because, like, well, we can't recreate the classics, and we can't do anything different because people are going to hate that if we do 3 and 4, because they didn't get received well. So now we have to literally not even call it Alien and just go all the way over here and do stuff, which is an understandable reaction somewhat. But I also, like, I don't know, I feel like there's been too much of a, with this franchise in particular, almost kind of what's existed for, the best example I'll use, and just because you said we won't get a sequel to 3 or 4, what that immediately reminded me was, oh, they're going to terminate this, where we only do sequels to 2. but we keep doing multiple sequels to just 2, because then the sequel to 2 didn't work out that time either, and we just only acknowledge 2 and have a branching timeline with 5 different things that happened after the second film.
I think you could, yeah, I think you could easily see that happening with this and something like Predator, this, and like Terminator.
Yeah,
like,
that seems to be the holy trinity for some reason, and they're also the 3 things that, like, appear in everything else. I don't want to get too off topic of the film, but I feel like this is a good example, maybe, of, just from my opinion, of seeing the franchise and the characters. The most interesting aspect from this franchise is the xenomorph. That's the iconic thing. That's everything else, yes, has meat to it, but it's not something you can't do in another sci-fi franchise, right? You can do the evil corporation. The xenomorph itself, like not even just the design, but the concept of it, like the fact that other races can get turned into it. You can, and that's explored in this film, thankfully. It can affect humans. The idea of the apex predator being used by humans and the faults of that, the design of it, everything about it is what the franchise lives and breathes on. It literally, like, it's like a face hugger. It just waits for another franchise to come along so it can impregnate itself into it. And I feel like that's probably the best way you can go with this, because the moment you've cloned your main character and you've had her give birth to a human hybrid xenomorph, like, it is hard to get crazier after that, like, unless you just do, all right, now he fights Predator. Like, I can understand why that was the next response as well. So it's, I don't envy him. I think that's just the place where I'm at, is I'm struggling to find ways where I'm like, because normally with stuff like this, I can be like, oh, well, I would have done this, or, oh, you could take it in this direction. With Aliens, it is one of those things where I'm like, no, those first 2 films do kind of say everything you really want to do, and if you and like, this does bring up interesting ideas, but I think it's the gravitas, because those 2 films are hailed so much. You'd really need a director and a studio that didn't give a fuck about them to be able to make it work, just to get away from that, because this is how you get this film where it's like, oh, new ideas, but we still want to make it fit the trappings, but also we don't know how to do it as good, so it comes across as generic, right? Like, that's it's a weird mishmash, and I'm not even making any sense, but that's how it feels. Is like you're being tugged between wanting to do something new, but the weight of the franchise is pulling you down, but you're not as good as the rest of the franchise, so you just get the gravity crushes you. It doesn't make you stronger.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I don't want to say that, like, there are franchises that just at a certain point there's nothing left to be said. Like, I don't want to necessarily say that, but there's certainly ways to get to a point where it's going to be very, very difficult to say something new that feels like it's an important thing to say in this franchise. And I think Alien potentially has that for sure. But I mean, this movie does almost do it. I mean, this movie has the whole like the forced motherhood, the losing her bodily autonomy, things like that. I mean, that's all in the ballpark of this franchise. It's just not the focal point, so it feels hollow.
And that's my worry. Is like, will if this came out still in the night, because it's kind of fallen off now, but in the 90s, Alien as a franchise was still kind of reverberating through pop culture and was still like a hot thing, even if the films hadn't been around for a good couple of years. It was still kind of that pop culture juggernaut. You'd see it in like comic crossovers and everything, and eventually you get the AVP films and such like that. So I feel like this probably had the best chance of like, oh yeah, fuck it, we're just gonna do our thing. I feel like anything coming out after that without the pop culture cash to kind of justify it does kind of feel like getting general audiences to care again is going to be really hard. I think that's my thing, is because the only thing they recognize is the xenomorph, but you can't really just do the xenomorph again without adding a twist to it, and even then it just comes across as generic. So it's just one of those things where I'm like, the franchise itself is in such a weird state. And I think the reason why I say this in this topic is I think this is directly tied to this film, because this entire film is built about trying to resurrect it, but it wasn't even dead. It was just kind of in a limbo, and it still feels like it's in that limbo even after all these years, and even after this film has these great ideas and these great concepts. And I wonder what that is. Is it just a quality thing? Like, if this film had just been a couple more drafts, refine the script, and just take more risks, would we have had more Alien sequels following this universe? Or was it just because it wasn't the first two, would people still not have liked it? Because I kind of get that impression as well. I kind of feel like it's one of those things where the hardcore fans just don't want anything more.
It's hard to say because Alien 3 wasn't that good either. I mean, the gap of time between Alien 3 and this movie, like Alien 3 was 92, this was 97. That's a shorter gap of time than between Alien and Aliens. Alien was 79, Aliens wasn't until 86. So I mean, like, I and you know, with that question, my go-to answer to that question is almost always, if the quality had been there, it would have continued, because Hollywood does that. Like, Hollywood looks at something bombing and they don't think, oh well, we just made a shit movie. They think the public just doesn't want this. I think that tends to be an attitude we see in Hollywood a lot, where it's like it's never that the film is bad. It's always just that audiences didn't want it, or audiences. And I think that in some ways we're kind of moving past that. I mean, we had two identical, not identical, but we had two Steve Jobs biopics because the movie industry recognized that people wanted one. They just wanted a good one. So, like, I think we are kind of moving past that. But I think if this had done well, like, I think if this had been well received critically, and was, you know, financially successful enough, I think we would have gotten follow-ups to it. Now, if those follow-ups were going to be good, that's an entirely separate question. But I mean, my answer to that is pretty much always, if it had done well and performed well, we would have gotten sequels to it. You know, 9 times out of 10, that's the answer. So, yeah. I mean, I don't know that I necessarily would have been, if this had done, like, if this movie had not changed at all, but just for whatever reason, it just really resonated with audiences at the time, I don't know that me looking back on it, having not seen this film until, you know, very recently, I don't know that I would have been excited for those sequels, but I think sequels probably would have happened.
I think that's fair. Do you have anything left to talk about this film particularly? Because I do have one thing after this, but it's not necessarily related to the film itself.
Just a couple small things. I don't like that I don't know how to explain this. I don't like that the xenomorphs have gotten slimier and wetter over time.
I didn't know if that was just me. I didn't realize they were so wet.
They're not. Like, they're not in the original. Like, in the original movie, the xenomorph is not that, like, I mean, it's gross because it's like a big penis-headed alien monster, but it's not like drooling
It wasn't
everywhere, and
lubed
it's not
up
like
dick. It was hard dick.
yeah, exactly. it, it doesn't look like it just got out of a sauna or like someone just like covered it in baby oil. Like, and over the course of the movies they've gotten more slobbery, because in Alien 3 I buy it, because in Alien 3 the alien is an alien dog hybrid, like the face hugger attached to a dog, and then it birthed this like quadrupedal alien. So like of course dogs drool. It drools more. That just kind of like makes sense in like a, just if you think about it in like, for a couple seconds, you're just like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You don't really need to think about it that much more deeply. It just kind of works. But then they're just like, let's kick that up to 11, and all the aliens just look like they're covered in oil and just dripping saliva constantly. And I'm just like, why? Like, that's not, I don't understand it. And then like there's also apparently in the last 200 years there was some sort of android like rebellion that, like, in one line they're just like, oh man, you're an android. I haven't seen an android since this whole thing happened, and they didn't like this, and there was kind of an uprising thing. And I'm just like, oh, so at some point some sort of weird android rebellion uprising thing happened in the last 200 years, just off screen somewhere. So there's a couple like weird little like lore and story bits that are just kind of weird, but it's whatever.
That I
Those
think
are
is
the
funny, just because it's not even like you're an android. It's no, you're an android made by androids. Like, and it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I know. I'm just like, what was the point? You could have just been surprised that she was an android. Like, you didn't have to.
Like, where's that film?
Yeah,
Why
you were an android made by android, which is weird because of all that. I'm just like, oh my god, calm down. Just
like, does that android? Are they the worker force of those androids, and then the androids the worker force of the humans? Like, it's like 3 levels of segregation now. Like, what's going on? What's the difference? Like, how could you just tell that? Like, that's I think it's, and even she's got like goo inside. Like, everyone's gooed up in this film, and I guess for the sex metaphor, I mean, it's not a wrong decision. It just is making a little more apparent. Like, people are getting licked all over. People are getting sniffed. This is a horny movie. It's not even like that's. Like, we've even got like the pool scene where they have to swim away from the aliens, where they get wetter than they've ever been before. Put that on the trailer.
The CG alien swimming was delightful, though.
Yeah, let's be honest.
When they're swimming away and they turn around, I'm just like, yes, they're swimming through the water. That's amazing.
Yeah, to be fair, that's probably the best the CGI of them looks, because when they're on like, the stairs and like walking through the corridor, like super shiny, and then they look the most like 3D model. But when they're in the water, they have that like matte finish, and they look less gooey. It's like they just got a cleanse when they went in the ocean. So the ocean. But
Well,
like,
it just annoys me, because I'm like, in Alien 3, yeah, the xenomorph is acting more like drooly and like sniffing and things like that, but that was because it was birthed from a dog. There's no reason for them to behave that way in this movie. They should just look and go back to what the xenomorph was in the first movie. And I'm not saying, like, again, I'm not trying to be like it should be like the first movie, but I'm like, if that's what you're clearly trying to do, then you should have done it. Like, I don't understand. Yeah.
I wonder if that's also because I did look up that this is the production company worked on this for the prosthetics and like the animatronics for the aliens and stuff, had only done this in the third film, and they didn't do the one or two. They weren't involved with that, so maybe that's why. Maybe these guys just are only used to doing that because that's their only prior experience. Which again is it's understandable, but it also feels like someone in charge should have pointed that out. someone actually in the story group should be like, hey, actually no, we're not doing the dog version this time. You can call it off. It's like, oh, okay, like, because the you can't blame the set designers and the prosthetic people for like doing their jobs. They don't get to make the decisions on that. So that's entirely on the blame of the director and the writers for that one, which is, it's not a huge deal, but it is definitely, it's something I noticed as not a fan of the franchise. So I can't even imagine just seeing the aliens like this. They look good when they're practical, but they do look just, why is this here? It's just an unnecessary change. The thing I did want to talk about though, going up the last thing, is the proposed sequel to this was going to be set on Earth, which would have been. It's the first time we would have seen that, right? We still haven't gone to Earth.
Yeah, we still haven't gone to Earth. Yeah, at least not in the movies. I don't know. I know there are like Alien comics. I think I don't know what those have done, but yeah, not in the movies.
How would you feel about that? Because to be honest, I thought the biggest thing that's overdone in the Alien franchise, and that's in comics, games, and movies, is get off the fucking spaceship. We've seen it. I don't need to see aliens stalking people in a spaceship ever again. Find a different location.
Well, I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like going from Predator to like Predator. It's like, wait, maybe I might be thinking of a different movie. Scrap that. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, yeah, I feel like that would have been kind of a more natural place to take this. It's funny because Sigourney Weaver turned it down because she didn't want to do Earth, and she actually wanted to go back to the planet from the first movie, where they originally found the the first egg.
I mean, that could have been cool too. Again, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
just anything but the spaceship, I would have been down for.
For sure. Because yeah, she's said, I don't know if this is, she had said at the time, she's like, I'd be down to come back for a sequel as long as I liked as long as I liked the script for it. And that just hasn't happened. But no, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing it happen on Earth, especially because like one thing I do think they do that's kind of fun is whenever someone says like Earth, and Ron Perlman's just like, ugh, Earth, what a shithole. Like, I like that they set up that Earth sucks now and no one wants to be there.
It's like the Cowboy Bebop thing, where like
Yeah,
Earth is
exactly.
acknowledged, it's not a secret, but no one gives a shit about it. We've moved past it, that's always a fun sci-fi thing I like.
Yeah,
Is we don't
that's a
try and
trope, yeah.
hail it up as this magical, sacred place. It's just like, no, that's Earth. Fucking, we ruined that one.
So I don't know that it necessarily needs to go to Earth, but like an alien story where it's happening in a place that's heavily populated with like civilians, just that would be a nice change of pace. It doesn't necessarily have to be Earth. It could be some colony on some planet, but just like anywhere that is like a city or like a town or like something like that would at least be a change of pace where rather, because that's my thing, right? I'm like, the aesthetics of this ship don't really match up with the first two movies. I'm like, okay, but we could have just not done a ship. Like we could have been like, what does a settled colony look like in the alien universe? What does Earth look like in the alien universe? Like we could have done something like that. Instead, it's ship, very briefly a colony, but mostly inside like a big bunker, and then another ship. And then Alien 3 is like a prison, like it's like a prison, space prison, and then this is back on a ship. So just getting our asses on the ground and seeing what like a fully developed civilization looks like in the Alien universe, I think that's a missed opportunity.
Or even, because we set it up at the beginning, and that's not where we quickly ditched that aesthetic, but like scientific research base, right? That's where you'll be like, that could have been cool, like in a place that's designed to keep the aliens in, but because the people in charge are so selfish and so stupid, they actually keep fucking each other over with the security measures, and that's an added layer of like you get to see what people have made to, like, you know, a big red button at the start where like the guy's like using against the alien, like fucking that gets turned against him. I'm not the alien intentionally doing it. No, I could buy that, honestly. He recognizes the button works. But like that kind of thing, right, where like the hubris of man to think you can control nature with your technology and all this, where like this is nature, this is birth, this is creating life, it's on a different tier, it's above you. It could have been a really cool thing, and that kind of sterile environment would have been interesting to see, because we go so grungy with Alien, we go so dirty. To see as start the film, sterile environment, end the film, the walls are caked in blood. That'd have been cool, right? That would have been a cool like evolution to see. Is it becomes an alien set by the end of the film because so much shit has gone down in it.
Well, they do that a little bit in the game in Alien Isolation. It takes place on Sevastopol. Yeah, Sevastopol. It takes place on a. It's still a space station, but it's like a research slash mining ship that hovers around, or that orbits like a gas giant.
Hmm.
And so, like, yeah, the original Alien film takes place in a mining ship, and this one kind of has that same aesthetic, but it's also got more like research labs and stuff going on in it. So like Alien Isolation kind of does that, which is nice. But yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think the place to take this would have been, let's just do a setting that's a little bit different rather than failing to recreate the original setting.
And that's probably a good place to end this. Is so much of this is a good idea and concept, but hampered by also trying to be a subpar recreation. So you just kind of get like what's left is just a middling mess in the middle. But I wouldn't say this is, for me at least, this isn't egregiously bad. This isn't something I regret watching. It wasn't a horrible watch for me. It was entertaining at parts. Like I say, Ron Perlman shooting a spider, cinema, Oscar worthy. Sigourney Weaver with the basketball behind the back shot. I'll take it all day. So there are elements in this which I do enjoy, and I think some of the concepts and creature designs are well done. So for me, I'll give this three's an average. I wouldn't call it average. I'll give it a high 2.5. Like I wouldn't call this average because I do think this is a probably objectively bad film, but I do think this isn't unwatchable or anything. So a 2.5 out of 5. Androids created by androids created by androids created by nanobots.
Yeah, that's fair. This one ultimately, like I said, any diehard Alien 3 fans, crucify me all you want. That one nearly put me to sleep. This one, I was never really bored by it. I felt myself kind of incredulously enjoying the thing most of the time for how stupid it was. I still don't love it. I still think it's bad. So I'm going to give it 2 fucking hidden blade guns out of 5.
It's pretty hype though.
That was fucking hype. He's just got these like Assassin's Creed pistols.
Yeah,
Fuck, that's cool.
That's good, man. That's real good. All right. I did have a topic for next week, but as we were scrolling, as we were talking, I was scrolling, and I did find me and Ian did do something too similar for me to justify it being an individual episode. But I've got one that I think will probably have a more clickbaity title, and me and you will have more to talk about. And that is the state of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise.
Ooh.
Yeah. What we think about it, what we think where it's been, what we think where it will go, and just in general, games, movie, comics, TV shows, fan works, everything, just the full gambit of the blue bar. So you guys can look forward to that next week.
That'll be fun. Looking forward to it.
And until then, I am the champion of the oppressed.
I'm the Sonic erotica lover.
And we have been your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.